The central truth of the Christian faith is the fact that Jesus Christ, the eternal and infinite Son of God, entered into the creation and became a human being and dwelt with us and took upon himself all our griefs, all our sorrows, even death itself, and has, by submitting to these things, abolished all that is evil, and having risen from the dead, he leads us into newness of life. This is the core of the gospel. And yet when we phrase it in this way, it too easily becomes just an intellectual idea. It is all too easy to affirm this truth, to believe this truth, and yet not to live our lives in accordance with this truth. The brokenness of the world around us consumes and binds and distracts our minds, our hearts, and our very lives. And even as we confess and affirm again this simple truth, this intellectual reality of what we know to have happened, we may live a life that is entirely in opposition to this truth. We may still seek after wealth and pleasure and power, or the pettier things of human life, even as we believe in our mind and confess with our mouth the glory of Jesus Christ in our midst. And it is, I think, because this is possible for us that the church celebrates this service and the many others that are dedicated to the veneration of the Virgin Mary. Because when we see her, this intellectual knowledge about God becoming a human being is brought home to us in a vivid and a real way. When we look at the Virgin Mary, we understand that these words that so lightly trip off our tongue, God became man, are profoundly impossible to truly comprehend. When we see her, this maiden, holding this child who we confess is God, it is brought home to us how impossible what we confess is. Which is not to say that it is not true. When we see her, we comprehend that it is indeed a miracle. It is indeed a wonder. It is indeed the greatest thing that has ever or will ever happen. The Virgin Mary, presented to us in this poem, in these hymns, is a rock of offense for our mundane feet to stumble against, to be caught unawares as we go about our daily life and pulled out of the tedium of normal life, to be caught up in wonder and awe at what God has done for us. And every time we gather once again to meditate upon her life and what has been accomplished in her life, we confess the Lord's life and death and resurrection. and our faith is renewed, and our life is restored. Indeed, there are two ways in which the Virgin Mary does this. Simply by the fact of who she is, of what has come to pass through her. We look at the icon and we behold the incarnation. God become man. And if we recognize it, if we comprehend, if we realize what it is we are looking at, which every word of this service calls us to do, then that recognition serves as the call of Christ for us to change our way of life, to be transformed in our thought, our mind, our heart, our very being. And then, questioning how this may be, how we should go about doing this, we look again at her and we see her manner of life. Her prayer, her humility, her obedience. And we see laid out before us as a roadmap the manner in which we too are called to live. In the midst of these days of fasting, we are given 5 times a call to worship, a call to repentance, a call to come and see the good things that God has done for us in the Virgin Mary, by her consent. And seeing her, we understand what it means for us to rise, mind, heart, and body, and follow Christ. May we indeed be caught up out of our mundane, troubled lives by the image of this Virgin, the vessel of our salvation. And may her example be for us a sure guide and a steady understanding of how it is that we are indeed called to follow the one born of her out of darkness into everlasting life. May the Lord grant to all of you this wake-up call and this understanding of how we are called to live. And may He sustain us as we continue this journey of the fast from the midpoint at which we are now nearly arrived unto the very joy of the resurrection. Drive in peace and safety to your homes. If you are coming to